I might suggest that the Western model actually tries to deal with symptoms, but not with healing.
Yeah, I can firmly agree with that.
Yeah,
And it's taken a long journey for me to realize that there's a profound utility in what the Western medical model does,
absolutely.
but it's so incredibly imbalanced. And I think at this time, more than ever in history, we're very disconnected, and that imbalance in how we, from treating and healing, is just so pronounced that I think it's contributing to the fact that no matter how much tech we have, it's not really helping us heal.
What is consciousness and how can you cultivate it? Where do science and spirituality meet? And why does this matter? This conversation with Stephanie MoDavis covers a great deal of ground, from the convergence of science and spirituality to a look at the development of human potential. This conversation will challenge you on your own path to ever greater consciousness and awareness. Come join us. And Stephanie, welcome
Yes.
to Bump in the Road. If you would, tell us your story.
Hi, Pat. I'm so happy to be here. And thank you for giving me this time and space and your audience the attention to hear another human being's story. So I sit here today before you, as maybe many of us who've been on your podcast. I shouldn't be here. I probably should have died in my early 20s. I had a massive illness event that spanned a very long time for me. It started when I was 19. I was mysteriously late diagnosed with autoimmune disease after it already had wreaked havoc on my mind, my body, and multiple organ systems. But ironically, in my case, and maybe for other people's, I think this is important to mention is that up to and prior to my diagnosis, I was attempting to lead a really healthy lifestyle. So my autoimmunity isn't really related to lifestyle conditions, which I think in terms of health and wellness and chronic illness, the first mainstream route is to say, well, let's talk about your lifestyle. Let's talk about
Mhm.
what you're eating. In my case, I was actually almost the opposite extreme. Is I grew up as a perfectionist. I grew up in a complicated childhood situation where I had learned to maladapt to certain behaviors, and being a perfectionist, and I call myself a recovering people pleaser, is definitely a part of my journey, which I believe created such an emotional, mental and emotional toll on myself that there was no way to perfect myself out of the hurt that I experienced. And I didn't really have the wherewithal to process appropriately. And I think that's what actually turned into this physical autoimmune issue when I was 19.
That actually makes total sense to me. Can I ask what the autoimmune issues were?
Sure. Yeah. Again, at my healthiest, at around 19 years of age, I started to manifest with severe arthritis, pain, fatigue, and I was vibrant and healthy looking, but just inwardly, inside of me, my body started to cry out with these weird symptoms: fatigue, tiredness, swelling, joint pain, other odd symptoms, developing a lot of food allergies. It was just like all of a sudden my body was rejecting everything. And there was nothing I could do. So, after 1 year of misdiagnosis, being seen by many doctors who actually didn't know what I had,
Hmm.
they were willfully trying to help, but also with good intentions, but misdiagnosing me along the way. And it took a year for me to have so much of an inflammatory response in my body that I went in and had a near death experience where I started hemorrhaging into my lungs and simultaneously developed the main symptom of my autoimmune disease, which is lupus, systemic lupus
Hmm.
erythematosus, which was the butterfly rash on my face.
Hmm.
So at that point, all the doctors were like, "Oh, I see it now," because it's manifesting physically, that they could recognize that rash, and they said, "That's what you've got is lupus." So that was the diagnosis.
What happened after that?
Well, that started my 10-year journey. between the ages of 20 and 30 of really my body just deteriorating and me allowing, kind of surrendering my more holistic viewpoint. I was a yoga teacher and I was studying holistic medicine before I got sick. So thankfully, I had this introduction into Eastern philosophy.
Hmm.
And I understood this nature of slowing down and going within, as well as trying to attack the illness and get better with all sorts of medications and things like that. So I feel like I became a human guinea pig for the most part for that 20 years. And it was a combination to try to keep me alive of doctors, multiple doctors at different prestigious institutions, trying to give me medications or experimental drugs. I even had chemotherapy quite a bit to just try to knock out all my T cells, lost my hair, ended up in a wheelchair from high doses of Medrol over many years, just that my thighs were completely atrophied from the medication side effects. But simultaneously at home, I was working deeply on my inner state and really addressing that gem of what I had learned prior to my diagnosis of I think there's something also going on within that nobody in the Western medical model is asking me about. And it wasn't until I came across a really brilliant hematologist who sat down with me. And after I had been misdiagnosed and seen maybe 10 to 15 doctors, and he looked at me and he said, tell me what's going on. Like, how are you? And I immediately fell into the rhetoric that I always was in with my Western medical docs, which was, well, my blood pressure is getting higher. I was like, telling him my diagnosis. No, 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 no. Like, I need to know how you are. And I just immediately started bawling because I felt seen for the first time in my illness when he asked me that question. And at that point, I realized there's something to the work that I'm doing upon myself at home that actually is crying out for attention. And this doctor had a way, he knew what was missing. And he showed me that in a feedback loop. He showed me that by asking that question of really saying, no, I really need to know how you are. He allowed my feelings to flow, that I knew at that expression of bursting out into tears, there's something majorly wrong with how I am actually. And I need to really digest this and give myself the time and space to understand that this isn't decoupled from my illness, that it's actually both of these things are working together. And the Western medical model was steadfast on healing the body. But I realized at that time I had to remain just as steadfast in healing my soul.
I might suggest that the Western model actually tries to deal with symptoms, but not with healing.
Yeah, I can firmly agree with that.
Yeah,
And it's taken a long journey for me to realize that there's a profound utility in what the Western medical model does,
absolutely.
but it's so incredibly imbalanced. And I think at this time, more than ever in history, we're very disconnected, and that imbalance in how we, from treating and healing, is just so pronounced that I think it's contributing to the fact that no matter how much tech we have, it's not really helping us heal.
I think there's a significant psychological, spiritual component to healing, and that is overlooked. And I think it's overlooked to our detriment. And that's putting it mildly. I believe that we have actually a lot of healing that can be done internally that will have a profound influence on our overall health.
Mm-hmm. I couldn't agree with you more. And, I am, I'd say 10 years into my second organ transplant. That was the crescendo of the 10 years of lupus, was that it ended up settling in my kidneys, causing chronic kidney disease or CKD. And then my kidneys completely failing, both of them. And then I ended up in the hemodialysis chair in a clinic at age 26.
Oh,
So I spent 5 years of my late 20s in a hemodialysis clinic every other day for 4 hours. And thank goodness I had that spiritual inclination prior, or I don't think I would have made it through, or I would have ended up like the majority of the other people in the clinic. And that was highly medicated to just simply like get through the treatments. It's just a very depressing place to be. It's very difficult. A dialysis clinic is a very difficult place to be, and it's a difficult realization to know that if I don't come one day to my treatment, I may die. You're literally living off of a machine. So fortunately, I was recovered enough to become eligible to receive a transplant, and it took a long time. And I became very stoic and very spiritual and really more emotionally intelligent and developed because of that time, because I was facing my death every single day for such a long period of time in my 20s, when most people are getting married and graduating college and getting their job and really externally living. I was doing the deep work that I think most people do towards the end of their life or after a very traumatic event. So that was my event that really cultivated my profound love towards the psychospiritual dimension of healing and what it takes to actually be healthy, which is those coupled together, the psychospiritual and the physical.
I wonder how many people really do that type of internal revelation and review of their lives. I, in my travels, would say that the majority of people really never realize consciousness. And if you
Mm-hmm.
don't realize some degree of consciousness, aren't you
Mm.
missing your life to some degree?
I'm so glad that you asked me this question, and I just got flush with goosebumps because I don't know all the answers, but I will say that I had two experiences, Pat. My first experience was with physical regeneration through my own inner work, through what the medical field could offer me, and then obviously from the profound technology through kidney transplantation and having two amazing kidney donors, going through an organ donation process. It was all of those things in totality that caused this physical regeneration. And I mean, I was on death's door. You would have never guessed that I would have been able to recover physically the way that I have. But I'm talking about this inner journey. And what happened was my second experience was after my transplant, when the doctors promised me, you're going to get your life back, kid. Now you've waited so long. Look at you. Your health's back. Your numbers are back. Go get them. And at the first time in my life, at that point, about 6 months after my first transplant, I was 30 years old. I sat at my kitchen table, and I remember just putting my head in my hand and looking down. And I noticed what people would call depression. I could feel this heaviness just come over me. And I said, I'm going to have a problem here if I don't address how I feel in this moment. And I had to get very honest, and I had to, say to myself and my family, at the moment I'm supposed to be my happiest, I'm actually realizing of how much life I lost.
Mhm.
And now I don't have the skills, resources, tools. Like, I feel so behind. There was something really profound that came over me that I had to learn to also heal, was that my life was being divinely guided. And even though 10 years between ages 20 and 30 are formidable years for many people, I had this feeling that I lost a lot of time, and now I had to very quickly make up for lost time. And I didn't know how to do that. And I didn't know what to do that. I didn't even know who I was anymore, Pat.
Well,
I was some,
how can you after going through all that? And and how can you in a society that rewards external validation and materialism? How in the
right.
world can you try to validate your experience vis-a-vis the outside world?
Exactly. Exactly. So I prayed about it because my family, people around me who loved me, they think something's wrong when you're just given the gift of life. And this is part of the organ transplantation's another topic, but it's such a gorgeous process. But there's a lot of Pollyanna type behaviors around the process as well, where like now you got this kidney or liver or heart, and you got to really be appreciative of that. And dare you talk about anything that you're struggling with. So I realized, and I prayed about it, and I said, you know what, God, like, I'm not going to recover fully with this gift if I can't really reconstruct myself on the inside out. Like you gotta help me here because I'm not going to go on medication, and no shame to people who need medication for help, but I've always been the one who wants to feel it to heal it. I've always said, just give me the medicine. Just show me where the medicine is organically, and I'll take it. But I knew that this process of healing was not going to look like the medical field's process of healing. So I prayed about it. And then my next revelation or awakening happened. And that was through a beautiful yet complex relationship that I had with actually somebody who was very prominent in the medical field. So he was embodying kind of the epitome of what I just spoke about, which is the valuing of the matter and the firefighter type of energy in the healthcare system. And we got to kill the disease. And so I fell in love with this person who really was the embodiment of what he thought health was. And then I came along at a time where I was deeply craving this spiritual integration. And I was trying to teach him and share with him that, hey, we're missing half of the whole here. And it was a remarkable 5 year experience with almost what I would call the shadow of what I was trying to heal. It was almost like the both of us were the shadow side of what the other needed to integrate to fully come to consciousness. So I was really coming in with this spiritual imprint, this psycho spiritual consciousness imprint, and saying, like, this is the missing part. This is how we help patients do better. And he was struggling with his own indoctrinated belief systems from the institutions he went through. And there was just something about our connection that we knew that the other one had a piece of what we needed to recalibrate a conscious healthcare experience. Now, that sounds really beautiful. It wasn't really beautiful for the most part. It was a lot of contention and a lot of polar opposite energies butting up against one another, a lot of tension. But very deep underneath that tension was actually a pure love, because it was these two forces that were beyond him and I in human embodiments, trying to merge together to cultivate actually, I think, something better that we could offer back to the healthcare community, which is, what does health and healing look like when the healthcare system wakes up, when it becomes conscious of itself? What can we then offer humanity in terms of healing? And is there a way to couple these together, the healthcare and the healing process? So that was harder. Can you believe it?
Oh,
That process was harder than my kidney issues.
I can believe that was very difficult, but because you're trying to take somebody, and I've been there, where you're very right brain oriented and your thinking's very structured along a certain line, and you're asking them to let go of all that and enter this world where there's no vocabulary, there's no
Yeah.
clear path. And
Yeah.
how do you make any sense of it? It could just be a big void until you start to feel your way, and you may or may not find your way.
Yeah, it's definitely, the Persephone myth of going kind of down into the void and exploring this territory. And in a way, in that connection, I felt like I had my Persephone moment while I was going through my physical health issues, where I was going into the underground and surrendering everything I have and just sitting there in my wheelchair with no hair at 25 and realizing this could be the end for me, and gaining that spiritual maturity at that time. But when I connected with this man, I did start to see I was somehow about the relationship. I was initiating that in him, and he was initiating me a little bit into maybe balancing my left and right hemisphere a little bit, because I tend to be very spiritual, very metaphysical, and at times there's certain things in the day-to-day world post my illness experience that I have a little bit of a hard time with, that sometimes those left brain logic type of people are really good at.
Mhm.
I think I needed a little bit of that influence from him. But then at the same time, my reflection was offering this Persephone experience, which at times for him, oh, I forgot to mention, he was actually going through his own physical health issue at the time, which leaded to him needing his own heart transplant. So
Oh my gosh.
I think there was a bit of a terror, a inner longing and pull for this polarity balancing, or this right and left hemisphere dancing together. There was a bit of that knowingness very deep within. But everything in his structured reality went against this journey. And then having the heart issues on top of that, I think it really caused a lot of, in fact, many times he said, I might not survive this. So, but in my mind, I was trying to share, I think this is ego death, not physical death that maybe you're feeling. That fear of pressing forward. So it really teetered and towed the line between life and death, physical life and death for both of us, but also ego life and death. And honestly, how the ego death, in my perspective, was harder to navigate because you're blind. You're blind navigating the ego death a lot. You have to surrender it all to be able to gain it all. You have to be willing to lose it all. And that maybe that is even physical death. So for me, ironically, kidneys in Chinese medicine are connected to fear.
Oh, I
So
didn't.
that journey, yeah, like each organ has an emotional component.
Mhm.
So the kidneys connected with fear. So being able to go through the Western medical model and receive the physical organ and attain some level of physical health, coupled with the consciousness and the journey that I had gone through with this particular man specifically, helped me to overcome my own ego and to face my own fears and to really understand that this is all very temporary, and that living in gratitude and staying awake in every moment and doing the hard thing and speaking your truth and being willing to have very deep spiritual connections with people is such a profound life-changing experience for me. I was able to cultivate a spiritual connection with him. Since then, I've been able to start to create other spiritual connections, one with my female friend, which two women going to these depths and really kind of refining each other, like, sharpening each other, can be very difficult for women to do because sometimes women lean towards that safety and they want you to get their back and they don't want the mirror, the feedback. But for me, coming to consciousness was the gift. The transplant was a gift, don't get me wrong. But for the Western medical model to think this is the gift and what we have to offer you is the gift, it's ego, or what we say, edging God out.
Mhm.
Because the real gift to me now, when I woke up from my second transplant, because if you have a transplant, they often don't last forever. If you get it young, you often need a replacement. That's how that goes. So my last transplant was 10 years ago, and I woke up having experienced it before, and I sat up in the ICU and I crossed my legs in Indian style, and I'm a yogi at heart, and I sat up immediately in the ICU and I said to the nurses, I'm healed. And they said, oh, of course you are. It's just the medication, honey. Lay down. You're going to be here. I said, no, you don't understand. I'm healed. And at that moment, I realized, oh my gosh, they have no idea what I'm talking about. They have no idea what I'm talking about. And that led me on another journey. And the bulk of the work that I do in the world doesn't revolve around being an advocate for kidney transplants, which I would love to do. But what I think is more important and what can help recalibrate the collective at this point is supporting people through their awakening and helping them to realize that coming to consciousness and living your life spiritually and being willing to have the difficult spiritual connections with people, friends or relationships or family, is, I think, the only way forward.